They always said I wasn't cut out for business. Too soft, too sentimental, too whimsical. While my siblings carved out empires, I stayed in the background, smiling politely, doing what I was told, waiting for the moment I'd finally be seen. But recognition never came. Not from them, and certainly not the day we sat in that wood-paneled office, with its leather chairs and glass decanters of bourbon no one touched. The air was thick with perfume, ambition, and unspoken competition. My brother Marcus lounged with practiced arrogance, thumbs tapping out emails even during our parents' will reading. Veronica, ever poised, sat tall in her designer suit, her legs crossed just so, like this was another board meeting she was destined to win. Me? I sat at the edge of the couch, hands clenched in my lap, heart in my throat. Gregory, our family attorney, cleared his throat. As executors of the Wellington estate, your parents' final wishes are as follows. My pulse quickened. Marcus Wellington is to receive the Wellington Plaza building and 40% of the family corporation. Of course, that was always his. Veronica Wellington will inherit the Palm Grove estate and $2.5 million dollars in liquid assets. She smiled without smiling, just a slight victorious curl of the lips. Gregory paused before looking at me. I knew that pause. I'd lived in it for years. And Sophia Wellington. He hesitated. You are granted full ownership of Le Papillon restaurant, I blinked. What? I said before I could stop myself. Gregory adjusted his glasses. Currently in debt, behind on taxes, and technically in violation of 2 health codes. He gave me a sympathetic smile that made it worse. There's a note attached from your parents. Le Papillon is a burden. Sophia can sell it. It's all she can handle. A long, waited silence. Then Marcus burst out laughing. Are you serious? They left her that dump? Wow. I didn't think they were that cruel. Veronica gave a soft, pitying sigh. Sweetheart, just take the cash offer from the developers and move on. That place should have been bulldozed 5 years ago. Gregory offered no further explanation. No letter. No apology. That was it. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. My entire life I had played by their rules, taken the safe jobs, smiled at the family parties, swallowed every dream that didn't fit their version of success. I shelved my passion for cooking, so I could be the daughter they wanted. Dignified, quiet, unremarkable. And this was what I got in return. A failing restaurant and a one-line insult disguised as an inheritance. 1 week later, I stood in front of Le Papillon. The faded gold letters on the sign were missing half their shine. The windows were clouded with dust. A tattered closed sign hung crooked in the door. I unlocked it with the old brass key Gregory had handed me. Inside smelled like grease, mildew, and abandonment. The booths were torn. The light fixtures flickered. And somewhere in the back, something was dripping steadily. I stepped behind the bar and found a stack of unpaid bills, some dated over a year ago. I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen now, technically, and tried to imagine what it used to be. The tile was cracked, the stove a relic from the early 90s, and the shelves nearly bare. A single pan sat out, burnt on the bottom, forgotten. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, listening, wondering if I should laugh or scream. They had left me with nothing but a sinking ship, and the expectation that I'd go down with it. But as I stood in the quiet, a memory rose from somewhere deep. I was 6, maybe 7. Sitting on a tall stool in my grandmother's kitchen, watching her chop herbs with hands that moved like magic. Her voice soft, whispering, as if every recipe held a secret meant only for me. "If you cook with your whole heart, Sophia," she had said, "people will taste your soul. That's the part they never forget." My fingers tightened around the key in my hand. Maybe Le Papillon wasn't a burden. Maybe it was a door. And for the first time in years, I wondered, what if they hadn't left me with nothing? What if they'd given me exactly what I needed? Let me pause here for just a moment. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Like your dreams were too small to matter? Where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where our stories travel. And if you think you can guess what Sophia's about to do next, go ahead. Will she sell the restaurant? Will she fight back? I'm curious to know what you would do in her shoes. If this story speaks to you, even a little, don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories. That way you won't miss what comes next. Because trust me, things are just getting started. It was well past midnight when I finally turned off the lights and sat alone in the front booth of Le Papillon. The silence pressed in from every direction, thick, heavy, almost sacred. I could hear the occasional creak of old wood, the distant hum of a street lamp outside, and inside me, there was nothing but questions. Should I sell this place? The sensible answer was yes. It was a money pit, a rusting relic in a part of town people didn't visit unless they had to. Every crack in the tile, every unpaid invoice, every dead bulb above the bar whispered one thing: run. And yet, I didn't move. I sat there with my elbows on the table, staring at the dusty menu someone had left behind. The lettering was faded. Most of the dishes were French-American classics with no identity. And somehow, that menu felt like my own reflection. Generic, forgotten, lost in time. I let out a sigh, and then, without thinking, I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the storage closet at the far end. It smelled like cinnamon and rust. My grandmother's old spice rack was still mounted on the wall, empty now, but still labeled in her cursive handwriting. Thyme, paprika, rosemary. The names looked like ghosts of her voice. Suddenly, a memory surged. I was 8 years old. My grandmother, Anna, stood beside me at her kitchen counter, kneading dough for her famous apple galette. Her silver hair was tied up in a bun, and flour dusted her apron like fresh snow. "Don't overwork the dough," she whispered. "It needs time to breathe, just like us." I remember how she always hummed while she cooked, old songs I never knew the names of. I remember how safe I felt there, like the world couldn't touch me if I was in her kitchen. That night, in the silence of Le Papillon, I reached up to the top shelf of the storage closet and felt around until my fingers brushed something thin and familiar, a recipe box, blue metal, faded. The latch squeaked when I opened it. Inside were index cards, hundreds of them, each written in my grandmother's hand, some smudged with butter, some yellowed by time, notes in the margins, arrows pointing to little secrets. Add lemon zest if it's a cold day. Use your hands. The spoon doesn't feel. I brought the box to the counter, took out a card at random, and read potato leek soup, for when hearts are heavy. The corner was folded. I smiled. I looked around the dusty kitchen. It felt foreign and broken, but the recipe in my hand felt like home. I started peeling potatoes. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just cooked. And as the soup simmered, the smell filled the kitchen, with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe even joy. I took a spoonful, blew gently, and tasted. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. Not because it was perfect, but because it reminded me of who I used to be before I started asking permission to exist. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the restaurant until sunrise, flipping through recipes, writing notes, making a grocery list. I found myself sketching on a napkin. Ideas for the dining space, ways to open up the kitchen, where I could add soft lighting, maybe even bring in local artists. And somewhere around 5 a.m., as the first sliver of light crept through the grimy front window, I whispered the words out loud. I'm not selling. For the first time in my life, the decision didn't feel reckless. It felt like breathing. The next few weeks were chaos, but the kind that makes you feel alive. I scrubbed every inch of that kitchen myself. My back ached, my nails cracked, but I didn't care. With every pan I polished, every cobweb I cleared, I felt like I was peeling off layers of someone I no longer needed to be. Le Papillon wasn't just a building anymore. It was becoming a mirror of who I was, messy, flawed, but full of potential. Of course, I couldn't do it alone. I put up a hiring notice online, rebuilding a dream, looking for passionate people, not perfect resumes. I didn't expect much, but 3 days later, a skinny kid with tired eyes and a second-hand chef's coat showed up. His name was Miguel. I don't have a fancy degree, he said, clutching a folder of homemade recipes. But I can cook, I swear. I asked him to make me something. Anything. He made a grilled octopus dish with a smoky paprika aioli and a citrus glaze that nearly knocked me off my feet. It's a little wild, he said, watching my face. It's brilliant, I replied. You're hired. Next came Eleanor. She'd been working at Le Papillon for over 20 years. She walked in with her arms crossed, clearly skeptical of whatever I thought I was doing. I've seen 6 owners come and go, she said. All of them had visions. Most didn't last 3 months. I nodded. Then maybe you'll help me be the first who does. She didn't smile, but she stayed. We were a strange trio. Me, a 57-year-old woman with no restaurant experience, a former line cook with too much ambition, and a waitress with no patience for nonsense. But slowly we began to build something. We ripped out the old carpet, repainted the walls ourselves, installed shelves from reclaimed wood, and turned the dining space into something warm, inviting, but simple, not pretentious. I wanted people to feel like they were walking into someone's home, not a place that tried to impress you with gold-plated menus, but one that made you remember your grandmother's kitchen. The biggest change? We opened up the kitchen. No more hiding behind swinging doors. I wanted the sounds and smells to drift into the dining room. I wanted the stories behind every dish to be part of the experience. And the menu? That was sacred. I spent hours poring over my grandmother's recipes with Miguel. He brought his modern techniques, sous vide, foams, reductions, and I brought the stories. This one, I said one night, holding a tattered card. She used to make when my grandfather lost his job. It fed 6 people with nothing but onions, stale bread, and love. Miguel nodded. Then let's keep the soul. But we'll finish it with garlic confit and aged Gruyere. We tested everything. Twice. 3 times. Some dishes flopped, some sang. And one made us both stop mid-bite. It was a roasted chicken dish. Deceptively simple. But the way the thyme and lemon soaked into the skin, the way the pan just clung to the root vegetables, it was perfect. I think we found it, I whispered. Our signature. We kept tweaking the rest, but that dish never changed. We called it Anna's Sunday Roast. By the time we were ready to open, I had spent nearly every cent I had. Retirement fund? Gone. jewelry, pawned. I even sold the antique mirror my mother left me. Ironic, considering she never wanted me to look too closely at who I was. Opening night came, and not a single reservation. We stood by the door, dressed in our best. The lights were warm, the tables set, the air filled with rosemary and nervous hope. 5 o'clock passed, then 6. At 7, Eleanor turned to me and said gently, "Maybe people just need time." I nodded, but I knew the truth. No one knew we were here, and the ones who did probably didn't care. Still, we kept the doors open. I served soup to Miguel. He plated chicken for Eleanor, and the 3 of us sat at table 6, pretending we were guests in our own dream. We toasted with sparkling water and paper napkins, and somehow, despite everything, it didn't feel like a failure. It felt like a beginning. The next few weeks were harder than I ever imagined. Some nights we had 2 customers, some nights none at all. People walked by, peeked in, and kept walking. The new sign didn't matter. The fresh paint didn't matter. Le Papillon still had a reputation, and it wasn't a good one. We handed out flyers. We posted on local forums. Miguel even tried making short videos of our dishes for social media, but nothing stuck. Every morning I opened the doors hoping that today would be different, and every night I closed them with the same quiet ache in my chest. The bills piled up. The food waste hurt the most. Beautiful produce, hand-picked herbs, wilting, in the fridge because no one came to taste them. I started cutting corners. Fewer flowers on the tables, less butter in the sauces, smaller portions of cheese. Miguel noticed but didn't say anything. He just stayed later, worked harder. Eleanor cleaned the front windows twice a day, as if hoping a little more shine would pull someone in. And me? I stopped checking my bank account. I knew what it would say. One afternoon I went to the pawn shop. I handed over the last piece of jewelry I owned, my mother's sapphire pendant. It wasn't worth much, but enough to buy another week of ingredients. As I walked home with the cash in my pocket and shame in my chest, I wondered if maybe I'd made a mistake. Who was I kidding? For starting a restaurant at 57, betting my future on recipes from a dead woman. That night, the power flickered twice. The refrigerator let out a strange, dying hum. I sat alone in the kitchen long after Miguel and Eleanor had left. The walls felt closer, the lights harsher. My hands trembled as I pulled out the business ledger. I needed to know how bad it was. It was worse. We had 2 weeks, maybe less, before I'd have to shut it all down. I stared at the stack of invoices, at the rows of red numbers. I felt the tears coming, and didn't stop them this time. I buried my face in my arms and let it out. Everything. The anger, the exhaustion, the heartbreak. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I reached for the notepad where I kept our weekly numbers and started scribbling something, anything, to make the math work. But there was no way to make it work. That was when I did it. Opened my laptop, pulled up the email from the developer, the one who had offered to buy the space 6 months ago, the one I had laughed at. Their offer still stood. I hovered over the reply button. All I had to do was say, yes. Just one word. Behind me, the door creaked open. Still here? Miguel's voice, soft. He walked in, still in his apron, holding a beat-up old laptop. I wanted to show you something. I wiped my face, tried to smile. Unless it's a magic money tree, I don't want to see it. He sat next to me and opened his screen. Remember that chicken dish we posted last week? Hannah's Sunday roast? I nodded, not really following. Well, he said, eyes wide. A food blogger picked it up. Someone named Carla Eats. She reposted the photo linked to our page, and it kinda blew up. I blinked. Carla Eats? The Carla Eats? He grinned. Yeah. Apparently, she had a grandmother who made something similar. She wrote this whole post about nostalgia and flavors that bring people back to life. Said our roast was the first dish that made her cry in years. I stared at him. He turned the laptop toward me. Our Instagram page was flooded. Hundreds of comments, messages asking for reservations, people tagging friends. Miguel leaned in. You might want to check the inbox. We have 24 bookings. For this weekend. I covered my mouth with both hands. It felt unreal. Like maybe I had fallen asleep on the invoice pile and was dreaming. But it was real. The world had noticed us. All because one dish touched the right heart. All because we didn't give up. At least, not completely. I looked at the email from the developer still open in the corner of my screen, and I hit delete. We didn't sleep that weekend. The phones rang non-stop. Our inbox overflowed. People were actually begging for tables. Carla's post had sparked something. Not just curiosity, but emotion. People didn't want just a meal. They wanted a memory. By Friday evening, the line outside wrapped around the block. Miguel looked like he was going to faint. Eleanor muttered something about the good kind of panic. And me? I put on my grandmother's old brooch, the one I'd kept hidden all these years, and tied my apron a little tighter. We were ready. Almost. That night, we served 47 guests. We ran out of roast chicken by 8 p.m. I had to apologize in person to a couple who had driven in from 2 towns over just to try the dish that made Carla cry. They weren't mad. We'll be back, the woman said, smiling. Save us a plate next time. Word spread fast after that. More bloggers came. Local newspapers called. A radio station asked for an interview. I said yes, even though my voice shook the entire time. And slowly, Le Papillon began to feel alive. But I knew we couldn't survive on one viral moment. If we wanted to last, we needed to be more than a one-dish wonder. So, I doubled down. Every night after closing, Miguel and I sat in the kitchen, tasting, tweaking, arguing, laughing. We pulled more recipes from my grandmother's box. Some were too old-fashioned, some too delicate. But one night, I found something that made my hands stop. It was a folded note tucked behind the last divider. No title, just a card, yellowed with age, barely legible. I opened it. 3 ingredients: duck, wild cherries, rosemary, and a line scrawled in my grandmother's handwriting. For when a woman must remind the world who she is. I stared at it for a long time. Miguel leaned over my shoulder. What is that? I don't know, I whispered. But we're about to find out. It took us 2 weeks to perfect. The duck was pan-seared, then roasted low and slow. The cherries were reduced into a dark, complex glaze. Sweet, sour, a hint of bitterness. The rosemary added smoke, memory, defiance. We plated it on handmade ceramic. Just duck, sauce, and a single sprig of rosemary, curled like a signature. We called it Her Name Was Anna. The first time we served it, the woman who ordered it cried, "I'm not exaggerating." She took one bite, set down her fork, and covered her mouth. This tastes like something my mother made when I was little, she said. I didn't even know I remembered that. Miguel and I stood in the kitchen, doorway, watching, not saying a word. That dish became our second signature. Not because it was flashy, not because it was complicated, but because it had a soul. And that's when I realized we weren't just building a restaurant. We were building something sacred, a place where people could come and remember who they were, who they used to be, who they wanted to be again. Eleanor said it best one night as we were locking up. "You didn't just bring this place back to life, Sophia. You brought yourself back." She was right. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming. The restaurant was fully booked for the next 2 months. We added more staff, expanded the hours, even brought in a part-time pastry chef to help with desserts based on my grandmother's notes. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who ran meetings and payroll. But there I was, making spreadsheets with one hand and rolling dough with the other. We started getting press. Not just local food blogs, but real national attention, a segment on public radio, a write-up in a travel magazine, even a feature in a Sunday newspaper titled "The Woman Who Brought Back Le Papillon and Herself." But nothing prepared us for Thomas Carrington. If you know anything about food, you know the name. He's the kind of critic who doesn't smile, ever. People have cried after his reviews, both good and bad, mostly bad. One rainy Thursday evening, he walked in unannounced. Miguel nearly dropped a tray. Eleanor stiffened and whispered, "Don't look at him. Don't breathe near him. Don't even think aggressively." I took a deep breath, walked over, and greeted him like he was any other guest. "Mr. Carrington," I said. "Welcome." He raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." He ordered Anna's Sunday roast. No substitutions, no wine pairing, just water and silence. When the dish arrived, he ate slowly, deliberately, and then he wiped his mouth, set down his fork, and asked to speak with me. I walked over, heart pounding. He didn't smile, but he did say, "Your chicken reminds me of my grandmother. She passed 30 years ago. I hadn't thought of her in, well, quite some time." I waited. He stood, nodded, and left without another word. The next morning, his review came out. 5 stars. He called it the most honest meal I've had in a decade. And just like that, we were on the map. A few weeks later, the whispers began. A friend of a friend told us that Michelin inspectors were making rounds in our city. Then a mysterious diner came in, asked strange questions, didn't finish their meal, and left without a word. I didn't dare hope, not really. But part of me, a part I thought had died, started to believe again. We worked harder than ever. Not to impress Michelin, but to honor everything we'd built. Every dish had to be our best, every plate a story, every shift a love letter to the woman who taught me how to cook with my heart. And then one morning, I opened an envelope addressed in thick, elegant lettering. Inside was a single white card. Le Papillon has been awarded 1 Michelin star. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. I cried. I called Miguel, who screamed loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood. Eleanor brought champagne she'd been hiding, just in case. That night, we didn't cook. We danced, and when the dust settled, I found myself standing at the front of the dining room, looking out at the full tables, the warm light, the laughter. And I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pride. Not for what I had, but for what I built. The next week they came. My siblings. Veronica in a blazer worth more than my first car. Marcus with a casual, smug grin, like nothing had ever happened. "Hey, little sis," he said, looking around. "Place looks impressive." Veronica adjusted her bracelet. "We heard about the star. Congratulations." I folded my arms, waiting. "We've been thinking," Marcus continued. "With the momentum you've got, maybe it's time to scale. Franchises, licensing, take this nationwide. With our support, of course. Their support." Now that it was worth something, I looked at them for a long moment, and then I smiled. The kind of smile that says, "I remember everything you said, every time you laughed, every time you called this place a burden." "I appreciate the visit," I said calmly. "But Le Papillon isn't expanding." Veronica blinked. "Wait, why not?" "Because this isn't a brand. It's a story. It's my story. And this chapter doesn't include you." They stood there stunned. I gestured to a table. "You're welcome to stay for dinner. It's on the house." And then I walked away. It wasn't revenge, it was something better. Boundaries. Spring came, early that year. The patio bloomed with potted herbs and hanging ivy. The breeze carried the smell of rosemary focaccia and lemon tart. And every night the tables at Le Papillon were full. Of laughter, of stories, of people who came not just to eat, but to feel. Success no longer scared me. It humbled me. But more than that, it made me think. What now? I was 60 years old. I had done the unthinkable. I had turned a forgotten restaurant, once seen as a family insult, into something beautiful, something real. But I knew there were others like me, women who had put their dreams on hold, who had been told too late or too old, who still had fire in them, waiting for a place to burn. So I made a new plan, a quiet one. Beside the restaurant, in the empty lot we used to call useless space, I started building something. Not another dining room, a school, a small open kitchen classroom. No uniforms, no prestige, just a place where people could learn, to cook with heart. I called it the Hearth, and it filled faster than I expected. Our first students, a retired nurse, a woman who'd been laid off after 20 years in finance, a single father with a love for pastry, and one teenage girl who never said much, until she made the most perfect creme brulee I've ever tasted. I offered scholarships. I wrote grants. I partnered with local farms and women's shelters. I started work on a cookbook, not just of recipes, but of memories. I called it What My Grandmother Knew. Miguel became my head chef. Eleanor ran the front of house and oversaw training. And me? I taught. Not just recipes, but the story behind each one. Why we stir counterclockwise sometimes. Why we leave the soup alone when it's angry. Why we season with memory, not just salt. One evening, after class, I sat at the back of the restaurant with a cup of tea. The lights were low. The last guests had gone. The staff was laughing in the kitchen. I looked around and saw not a business. I saw a life, my life, built dish by dish, night by night, out of pain, out of courage, out of love. I remembered the day I stood alone in this same space, with peeling, paint and nothing but a key in my hand. How far away that woman felt now. And yet, she was still me, just braver. I smiled. At the far end of the dining room, a young apprentice was plating Anna's Sunday roast for staff meal. She glanced over at me, unsure. "Too much Juss?" she asked. I shook my head. "Trust your instinct. If it feels right, it probably is." She nodded and turned back to the plate. And just like that, I saw it. The circle. From my grandmother, to me, to her. One dish, one story. Passed on, and maybe, just maybe, that's what legacy really is. Not a name on a plaque, but a flavor someone never forgets. A lesson they carry into their own kitchen. A whisper from the past that says, "You are not too late. You are just in time." And I believed it, every word. What did this story mean to you? Have you ever turned something broken into something beautiful? Especially when no one believed in you. Let's talk about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too. Type 2 in the comments if you loved Sophia's journey. Type 7 if it made you emotional, but left you thinking. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Sophia's revenge stories for more powerful tales of justice, redemption, and second chances. You never know. The next story might just be yours.